Today is December 9th, 2015. Did you get that?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We are at the workplace of Michelle Holzapfel on Route 9 in Marlboro. My name is Nabu McNeese. Today's production crew is video camera Althea Holzapfel, on audio is Leander Holzapfel, and on still camera is Logan McKay.
Baby weird.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about your background.
Okay.
When did you move to Marlboro?
First, I'm going to take my gum out. I first came to Marlboro in the fall, September of 1969 to go to Marlboro College as a freshman. I was 17. It's a long time ago. You guys can do the math.
Where did you live before here?
I grew up in a town in northern Rhode Island. Should I be looking at you, Althea?
You're having a conversation.
Okay. I grew up in northern Rhode Island in a town called North Smithfield.
What are some of the reasons why you moved here?
Well, I initially moved here to go to college, but then after a year of college, I actually dropped out. That was the year that David came to Marlboro College, and he and I met. And make a long story short, we started traveling together, we started hanging out together, we started having kids together, and so we stayed. We liked Marlboro, and we decided it was a great place to bring up our kids, so we stayed.
How many years have you been in town? Or here?
Well, let's see, 69 to 79 to 89 to 99 to 2009. 12, 30, 47 years.
That's long. What is your spouse's name?
My spouse's name is David James Holzapfel.
What has been his career?
He has had a dual career in that he and I started this business in 1969, although before that we had done carving. But anyway, his first career was being a woodworker and furniture maker. And then in 1989, I believe, he also got his teaching credentials and started teaching at Marlboro School. And he just retired from that after 25 years. But during that time, he still kept making furniture. So he's two things. At least two things.
What are the names of your children?
We actually had 3 children. Our oldest son is named Simon. His younger brother's Forrest, lives in town. And we had a daughter who died in infancy. So we had 3 children.
During what years did they attend the Marlboro Elementary School?
Simon, oh boy, this is math. So Simon was born in 1974, so I guess he started in 1980, and Forrest would have started in 82. And they went all the way from kindergarten right through to 8th grade.
Was the elementary school different than now?
Yes, it was different. There were less buildings, for one thing. The part of the school that you walk into and kind of the downstairs and Ellen's room, that was originally the school. Then in the mid-1980s, in fact, when I was on the school board for a while, is when we built the library, the room that is now Judy's room, and since then the outback has been added, and yeah, it was much smaller, much different. There were, I think, 3 teachers back then. Yeah, it was quite different.
What were some of the names of their teachers at MES?
Let's see, they started out with, I can see her. Connie Barton called her Boots. I can't remember anyway, Miss Miller, John Esau was their teacher, both of them. And then they went on to be in Connie Barton's class, and then Bruce Cole.
Where did they go to college?
Simon went to college in Minnesota, to Carleton College, and Forrest went to Bard College in New York State.
Where do they live now, and what jobs do they have?
Now, Simon lives in New Lebanon, New York, and he's the head of school of the Darrow School, which is a private high school. And Forrest is the town clerk and one of the listers of Marlboro, Vermont, the town we live in, and he just happens to live right next door to us.
What are their spouses' names and occupations?
Simon's wife is Amy Strahler Holzapfel. She teaches drama and is the head of the drama department at Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts. And Forrest's wife Jess, who is Leander and Althea's mother as well. She does independent work. She's a librarian, but she also does independent work, archiving. She does a lot of things. She's a very good artist and poet as well.
Do you have grandchildren, and what are their names, and where do they live?
Yes. Simon and Amy have two children, Ezra, who is 10, and June, who is 5. And then Forrest and Jess have Leander, who's 14, and Althea is 11.
How would you describe yourself when you were a child?
When I was a child, I lived in a family with a lot of kids, in a house also with my grandparents lived upstairs. And there were 6 kids in my family, and I was the third. So there were a lot of kids all around me. And I was kind of quiet and maybe a little bit shy. And although I liked to play with my sisters, and I had one brother who was younger, I also liked very much reading, drawing especially. I'd like to always try and find a quiet spot where I could do some drawing or work on a project, and and then there were times when, of course, I liked to play. And we also had, as you can imagine, there was a lot to do in the household. We had a lot of chores to do as well. And I would say I was a cooperative kid, and I think I'm still cooperative. So.
What high school did you go to?
I went to North Smithfield Junior Senior High School. It was brand new, newly built when I first went there, and it was in North Smithfield the same time where I lived.
What did you do between high school and college?
I had a summer after I graduated from high school, and I came right to Marlboro.
What challenge or what college or university did you attend?
Well, after I dropped out of Marlboro, I had Simon and Forrest and Ada, and it wasn't until 1993, I think, that I actually went back to school. It's the time during which Forrest and Simon were already in college, and so the 3 of us were in college at the same time. And I got my bachelor's degree through the adult degree program at Norwich University. So that's really where I sort of graduated, got my BA from.
What was your plan of studying there?
I studied a number of things. I studied sort of the relationship between science and art. I studied sort of women's studies. And I guess it's sort of an art history study as well.
May I ask you how old you are?
Yes, today I'm 64. 2 to the 8th power.
When did you begin to realize that you wanted to be a professional artist?
Well, when I was really little, like 2 years old, and could just walk around, I grabbed some crayons and started drawing on the walls. And my mother realized that I really liked to draw. And I think ever since I can remember, I love to draw. And so when I was a little kid, you know, you get to be 6 or 7 and people ask you what you want to be, and I would always say, I want to be an artist. I didn't think about it in terms of a profession at that time, but I felt like that's what I liked to do. That's what gave me the most pleasure, was making things, sort of building and making things and drawing and painting. So from a long time I knew that, and becoming professional was a longer process.
Why did you choose woodworking?
When I was in high school, I had a wonderful art teacher named Audrey Blake, and she, one of the units that she taught us was printmaking. And you can make prints in a lot of different ways, but one of the print-making techniques that we studied was wood block printing, where you take a block of wood and you carve away everything that you don't want to print. It's kind of like if you've seen a little stamp pad, it's that basic idea. Anyway, I started carving to make wood blocks, and I found that the printing process wasn't that interesting to me, but I loved the carving. And so in high school I started carving, and during summers I would carve signs for people who seemed like, for your house, I'd carve a sign that said the McNeeses. And that's when I, in a sense, became professional, because people paid me for that, and I was really psyched. And that's how I started carving. I think that was your question, right? How did I start?
Or why did you choose?
Why? So I chose wood because it was like wood blocks. Later, when David and I started this business, he started working for Roy Sheldon, who made furniture, and he had some experience making furniture. He liked woodworking, and we kind of just decided to try and continue this woodworking business that Roy Sheldon had begun. Roy Sheldon died. And we started this business here, and I think the thing about wood was it was everywhere, it was around. It was inexpensive, it was beautiful, it was interesting, and we both liked carving, and it was kind of a no-brainer.
Do you think it's better to learn how to make art in a school or on your own?
Well, I'm going to say both, because in a school environment you can be exposed to all kinds of media, all kinds of technical support that you might not be able to do on your own. But ultimately, when you stand there in front of an easel, whether you're in a college or at home, you're ultimately self-taught. You're ultimately teaching yourself what the things that you can make that express yourself. So I think both are important. Nobody can tell you how to be creative, but people can tell you, like, the best way to stretch a canvas or something. So.
Can I just pause? Zenobi, can you move a little bit? Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. How did you come to choose wood as your most recognized medium of artistic?
Well, I started out, when we started the business here, using wood, and I guess I got known as a woodworker, over a long period of time, partly for making things that were different than what other people were making. And that's what people sort of recognized that I had I don't know, I guess I don't quite understand. Most recognized by me or by other people?
Just by you.
Oh.
You.
That I most recognize wood, or you come to choose wood as your recognized medium. Like I said, I think it's just, we sort of happened upon it.
Mm-hmm. And
we just kept using wood because, I don't know, it was here.
Yeah. Whose work or what styles do you feel have influenced your own work the most?
Well, when I was like your guys' age, I used to spend a lot of time in libraries, especially looking at art books. And I was very influenced by modern art. I was very influenced by craft media like, like weaving and like pottery. I can't say there was any one particular person who influenced me more than others in terms of style, but I was a student of art very, very young, and so I absorbed a lot of different styles, a lot of historical styles.
Keep going.
I think if you've got the giggles, you can step
Alright, go
into
ahead.
a cold
Sorry.
space for a minute. I don't know.
Alright,
There's
go
something
ahead.
particular. David and I both have done a lot of odd jobs over the years to make ends meet. And in a sense, you can work to make money, or you can work at stuff that means you don't have to spend money. So if I'm doing carpentry around the house, or doing some plumbing, or making David a shirt, or making a big garden, in a sense, that's adding wealth and value to our household economy, but I'm not necessarily getting a job, getting paid, bringing the money back. So there are different ways to sort of have a career.
Who or what experiences have kept you engaged in woodworking?
Well, the experience of success, the experience of having a show and having people love your work and buy it, that definitely has kept me engaged and enthusiastic. Seeing other people's work is very engaging, not necessarily woodwork, but seeing the things that other people have made is very, very inspiring. What was the word you used? Engaged. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what keeps me engaged is just that someone wants something that I've made, and I'm happy to make it for them. Mm-hmm. It's nice to know that you're wanted. Yeah. In a sense.
When your sons were young, how were you able to balance your work in the studio with your home responsibilities?
That's a good question. That was difficult. There were times that it was really difficult. Before David started teaching, we both worked out here, and Assignment Forest would wander in and out, and they'd make stuff. They'd use the tools, and generally they were making guns. That seemed to be the thing to me. But I think, as can happen in a lot of families, if they were sick, or if it was like a school potluck, it was often more my job to do that stuff than David's job. So that was difficult sometimes, but those are bigger issues of the role of men and women in society. That, in a sense, we were working out in our own family, but it was hard.
Where would David be?
He'd be out here working.
Okay.
Like we'd have a craft show coming up, and he'd have 3 tables he was working on, and I'd have a dozen small vessels I was working on. And it got to be, say, 5 o'clock, and who goes in to make dinner? Usually me. And I don't know, that was all right, but we were always working that out, like whose time, who does what, when.
Mm-hmm. Your woodworking studio in Marlboro is called Applewoods. How did you come up with the name, and when did you first open the business?
Applewoods is the English version of the name Holzapfel. Yeah. Holz means wood, and apfel means apple. And we started the business in 1976, the summer of 76. Is that everything? Yes.
Yeah. Your home is right next to your studio. What are some of the personal differences to working at home. Is there a downside to that?
Yeah, there are plus and minuses to having your house nearby. It was great when the kids were growing up because we were just here. We didn't have to send them off to daycare or anything. That was a plus, but it was also a minus that they were here, because if they were somewhere else, we might have been able to work with less interruptions. So there was like a plus and minus to that. Because like if I had shop space in the house, that would be really inconvenient, because you have to keep moving stuff around. The fact that we have workspace out here and living space in there, we kind of try and keep them separate. But yeah, things can bleed over. I would say mostly it's a benefit. I can put something in the oven, come out here, work a little bit, go back in, take it out of the oven. It's, and if I worked 5 miles away, I wouldn't be able to do that.
What are some of the characteristics that an artist and crafts person should have?
To be successful, yeah. Perseverance, sense of humor, a strong work ethic, imagination, curiosity, flexibility, the ability to live on not much money, and sort of getting along in the community, either in the community of other craftspeople or just in the community we live with is important, because that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it sort of takes a village to be a craftsperson as well.
Could you describe some of the types of objects you make?
Yeah. Generally, a great deal of what I've made are vessel forms, bowls, vases, and they're almost always carved. Sometimes the surface will be carved to look like it has leaves carved on it. Sometimes I carve things to look like textiles or books. That's a kind of carving called trompe-l'oeil. It's a French word that means fool the eye. And it's a kind of carving that something looks so realistic. It looks like a banana, but it's wood, and people touch it and they're like, oh, I thought it was a banana. Well, it is a banana. It's a banana carved out of wood. I made food, pies, cakes, all kinds of stuff, in a sense that relates to my domestic work to a great extent. Generally always using wood. I guess that's just a pretty short but true description.
Are there particular woods that you like to work with? What do you like about them?
Yes. I mean, we were lucky in that there's an awful lot of wood around here that we've gotten from loggers. And so we use the native woods. We're using maple, birch, cherry, sometimes walnut, sometimes beech. One of my favorite woods is cherry, just because it's a very beautiful red color. Maple and yellow birch are incredibly wonderful woods to carve because they're so hard, and you can make forms with sharp edges that are strong. I like all the woods, and like walnut's very dark. You can use cherry and walnut and maple together and have sort of a palette, have a light, a dark, and a medium tone if you want to combine them and make really a quite colorful, object. So I sort of like everything that grows around here.
Would you please talk about your wood turning lathe? Maybe look at it?
Yes, sure. The lathe that I used to turn wood was built by my father, who was a machinist. And he needed to do some machining and turn some round pieces, so he put this lathe together. He built it himself. He was an incredibly smart guy when it came to putting tools together. He was a tool and die maker. So he built this lathe for himself. He used it for the projects that he had. And then my parents moved and he didn't need it anymore. And so then I have it now. And it's meant to form metal, not wood. And so it has a particular setup where the cutter is held on a post, and you manipulate the cutter in and out, back and forth, by means of these two little screw handles. A traditional wood turning lathe, you stand there and you have a tool and a tool rest. A tool, it's like a chisel. And you stand there, and it's the strength of your body that is holding that tool as you manipulate it. Whereas with a machine lathe, you're kind of removed. You don't need to have tremendous physical strength. So that's partly why it was a really good tool for me. It's big, it's heavy. When you're turning something eccentric, it doesn't vibrate very much. It's bolted to the floor. So it's a great tool, a really great and unique tool. And yeah, you guys can look at it.
We'll take a clip out there.
What other tools do you regularly use?
I use a chainsaw for roughing out quite a bit. I use all kinds of grinders and sanders for abrasive work. I have a tool that's powered by air power that looks and sounds just like the dentist tool. And just like a dentist tool, you can put different tips on it, and I do a lot of fine carving with that. Sometimes I carve by hand with an X-Acto knife. I use a lot of sandpaper, chisels, gouges, sort of traditional wood carving tools as well, and other, sort of other things. But that's pretty much it.
How many tools do you use on one project?
Wow. I might use 3 or 4 on a simple project, but I might use a dozen different tools on a more complicated project. It just depends. There was one time when I was carving a book, and I was carving the pages, and I wanted it to look the way pages look on a book, and I'm trying to find the right tool. And finally I go into the house and I grab a bread knife, a serrated bread knife. And by raking that bread knife along the edge of the book, it made the edges look like deckled paper, like that really irregular look. And so there you go. I didn't use a bread knife a lot, but when you really want to make something, you find what you need to do it, and sometimes it's sort of unexpected.
How would you say your work has changed over your career?
Mostly at the beginning it got more and more complicated and took longer and longer amounts of time. That's a big change. In a way, my skills improved, so I feel like my work got refined, got better. But at some point, it's not that it got better technically, it's that it got better at telling my story. So there's like getting better with technique, and then there's getting better with imagination and form and design. And that's ongoing. I hope that I continue to get better at that.
What are some of your early interests compared to what are you working on now?
Early interests in woodworking?
Yeah.
Well, early on, I must say early on I was really interested in the vessel forms and the vases and bowls. And over time I got less interested in that and started making sort of wall pieces, like assembled pieces that could be on a wall and that weren't so much like a single form. Have I answered that? Did I leave something out? Should I? You're looking at me like...
It's your answer.
Okay.
How do you decide what you're going to make?
Oof. Well, you sort of come at it from a lot of different angles. There's the wood that I have. There are ideas that I've written down in my sketchbook. Like, I might have an idea for half a dozen pieces that I'd really like to make, but I've got to find the wood that can accommodate it. So figuring all that stuff out comes from a lot of different directions, and sometimes I'd start a piece and it was not going to work out with that piece of wood, and then I have to sort of start again. So it's a complicated sort of back and forth process.
Would you give an example of your process from making something from first idea to finished piece?
First idea is usually, as I said, something that I've sketched somewhere, like I want to make a bowl with a monkey on it, or a monkey, an elephant, and a tiger walking around the rim of the bowl. In a case like that, I've got to find a burl that's the right shape for a bowl, that has, that doesn't have a big crack in it, it's going to fall apart. And so if I'm going to make that piece, which I might, I would find a good piece of wood, I would put it on the lathe, I would turn out a rough form, kind of thick and not very polished. Then I would take that off of the lathe and bring it into this space and start using my carving tools. I would probably get a crayon, lay out the design, draw on the surface, start cutting, then maybe draw some more on the surface, then cut some more, and you cut big chunks at first, and you cut finer and finer and finer until you're getting down to the details. And then it would be sanding, oiling the surfaces, and then praying that someone wants to buy it.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be hard to kind of, like, you have it in your mind and you drew it, but is it hard to, like, somewhat perfectly?
Yeah, it can be difficult, and that's where practice comes in. I've made a lot of mistakes, lots and lots of mistakes. But with practice, I got better at that. And in a sense, it is perhaps just a talent that I was born with, because I can look at something and I can imagine it in my mind, and I can turn it around in my mind and see different sides and see it. And that's just something I can do, that I'm good at. So that ability to visualize forms has been a good inner tool to have.
Do you have a favorite period of your working career or a favorite type of work that you like to make?
Well, the first favorite period was, I don't know, I've had a lot of fun, maybe more fun than I deserve. There were other times when there were other times when I had just really fertile working periods and made work that I liked a great deal. I mean, I would say pretty much all my working career has been, I don't know, a pleasure and sort of an honor to be able to make what I feel like making. I don't think there's any one time that's more special to me than any other time.
What inspires you?
What inspires me? Well, looking at forms in the world, the human form, the forms of trees, the forms of plants, the forms of animals, and then geometric forms, patterns, all of those things get my brain really heated up. I look at forms and I start thinking about how I could make them. So even forms like architectural forms, buildings, even land forms, like mountains and rivers. I mean, there's nothing that isn't beautiful. Even a big pile of junk can be inspiring. Even, a pile of dirty dishes can be inspiring. It's more, the inspired part comes from my state of mind. And the most beautiful painting in the world could be uninteresting to me if I'm not in the mood to sort of absorb that beauty.
What role does drawing have in your artistic practice?
It's very strong. I mean, as I said, when I was a kid, I drew a lot. It helps me to visualize what I'm doing. And sometimes I just draw for fun, to sort of imagine pieces that I maybe don't even ever make. But it has been very important to me. I really think when I was younger, I thought I was going to be an illustrator, like for children's books or something. So I do think of myself as a drawing person. Very important.
Do you work with materials other than wood?
Well, I do a lot of sewing, and you can see here there are some textile pieces, but I really haven't too much combined wood with other materials. Sometimes I use a little bit of gold leaf, but or I might use some small metal parts, but generally no. But I have sometimes incorporated chocolate chips into my work. Aha! See, I'm just waiting to see if these guys are paying attention. Okay, go ahead. There might be other...
What do you...
Wouldn't the chocolate chips melt?
No, I never did. I was just seeing if
Great.
you guys were paying
I just,
attention.
you know.
What do you like to make?
In terms of wood.
Yeah.
Like, what's your most fun?
Yeah, what would you...
If you could make anything, what would you make?
I don't know that I can answer that question. I think, you know, if I decide that I'm really enthusiastic about making a particular piece, it's something that will come out of my imagination. And if I feel strongly about it, I'll make it. But it's not, I can't say, oh, I love making, I mean, I like making woven patterns, but I like making a lot of different things. So there's no, I guess I'm sort of skirting that.
Would you tell us something about your newer work and about inklings and linen fold?
Yeah. As I've gotten older, woodworking has been increasingly taxing on my body. It's really hard on my hands. You know, it's physically hard work carving hardwoods, and so I decided to start returning to sewing, which is something I love to do. You guys have seen David shirts that I've made over the years. And I decided to kind of start a little side business here at Applewoods, and decided that linen fold would be a good name, because linen fold is a term of carving for a certain motif that looks like folded linen that's carved on a panel. And I liked it that it had the word linen in it, but it refers to carving, and so I'm kind of segueing into sewing. And the inklings, that's sort of a little line where I've taken some of my drawings and made Xeroxes of them and mounted them in frames, because people have liked the drawings, so people could buy drawings as well from the shop. And I've really just begun. I have some ideas for incorporating words, poems with fabric, making fabric collages, and a bunch of other ideas. So it's nice for me to go back and forth. I still like woodworking, I'll still continue to do it, but having the sewing is just kind of refreshing.
How would you describe your business?
Applewoods, well, it's a partnership. We use local hardwoods. We make, especially David makes functional furniture, functional sculptural furniture. My work tends to be less functional. In other words, I'm not making salad bowls. But I would say our work is very sculptural. We sort of treat the wood like a very interesting material that has a lot of different formal qualities. We're here on Route 9, so people who are driving by stop in. People from out of state. We've had people from Japan stop in. We've had people from all over the world who are visiting Vermont stop by, look at our work, and enjoy it. It's a rare person who can afford to buy our work, because it's, you know, when you put weeks and months into a piece, you can't just sell it for $50. So we're, you know, it's considered expensive, but people buy it, and it's been great. It's been really great.
Learning how to become an artist is one part of your work. Running the business part of it is another. How did you learn to run the business and promotional parts of your job?
Yeah, that was sort of by the seat of our pants. You know, we, again, because we never had a whole lot of money, we had to do a lot of that stuff ourselves. So we made our own signs, we made our own brochures, we made our own business cards. I did the bookkeeping, I learned to do the taxes, and that was all just so that we could do it ourselves and didn't have to pay someone else to do it. But doing work, the sort of graphic work of designing an ad for, you know, for the, well, for any sort of advertising purpose, actually, websites, you know, you have to put your business out there in various forms, and that's a skill. That's a skill in its own, and I would say we just learned them by looking what other people were doing that looked good to us, and sometimes just copying that or copying some aspect of it, and asking other people what they thought. You know, people would say, "Gee, I can't read what's on your sign." If they tell you that, then it's time to redesign it. You know.
Do you sell your work in galleries or museum shows, or from your studio?
I mean, over the course of my career, I've sold through craft shows, I've sold through galleries, and sometimes if I have a show in a museum, I'll sell work from that, and sometimes people will come into the shop and buy work from me, and sometimes it's from online. People see my work online, so all of the above.
If galleries or museums were, where was your most recent exhibit?
A year ago, David and I showed our work up at Marlboro College at the Drury Gallery, and before that, I had a show at the Fuller Craft Museum in Brockton, Mass. I think that's it. Recently, we've shown our work at the Mitchell Giddings Gallery down in Brattleboro. And I have some work online. It's a site called the Modern Archive is selling my work, so I'm trying to hit all the possibilities. It's a noisy floor.
They're just going to take pictures of some other.
Who is a typical buyer of your work?
Well, generally someone who has a certain taste, who likes carving, who likes woodwork. Some people are just crazy about wood. Generally it's a person who's, you know, fairly well off financially, because the prices tend to start at around $1,000 or so and go up from there. So, you know, not everyone can afford that. But it's not just a question of having money. People have to have the money, and they also have to find my work to their taste, find it interesting. And when you get a person with both those things, then we're in business. But I don't take it personally. A lot of people like my work and can't afford it. And there are people who probably can afford my work and just doesn't turn them on. So it's a big old world.
Yeah. Do your buyers ever tell you why they've bought a piece of yours?
Yes, sometimes. I mean, sometimes they just see it and they love it and they can't necessarily express what they love about it, but it reminds them of something, or it just, I don't know, it appeals to them in some deep way. And when an artist's work gets to be well known, sometimes people buy it because it's well known. And there are collectors out there who want to have a piece by all the well-known wood carvers. And so I'm on that list, and they'll come and buy a piece from me just to have their collection feel complete.
What do they say?
Yeah, I mean, they'll say, either they'll say, I really just love this, I don't know why, or, I mean, sometimes they don't say anything at all, they'll just buy it, and I don't always get feedback. Especially if I sell through a gallery, sometimes I never meet the person who buys the work.
Would you please describe a typical day of work from when you get up until you finish in the studio?
Well, when I was working more full-time in the studio, I'd probably get up and, have some breakfast, check emails, pay some bills, and then get out here around 9, work till noon, take a break for lunch for an hour, and come back out, work during the afternoon. But as I've gotten older and the work is sort of physically harder, sometimes I've sort of switched more to half-time, where in the morning I might get up, do the same stuff, work in the garden, or take care of grandkids or something, and then just work afternoons, work more like a 4 or 5 hour day than an 8 hour day. And that's been trending more recently. And then generally I make dinner and I go in and we look at Netflix. And I go to sleep.
I need to move this forward, so I'm just gonna...
Yeah, there's a real squeaky spot right there.
It's more that the camera is actually on. There we go. The light made you look like a ghost for a
Yeah,
little bit.
I feel like that.
What do you feel are the more important parts of your work?
More important parts? I don't think there's one part that's more important than any others. Making the initial form is obviously very important to get it right, but getting the carving right is important, doing the sanding properly is important, making sure the bills are paid is important, and making contact with people who have questions. I mean, because it's all like a big machine, all the parts are equally important. You can't like take one out, or you can't ignore one and hope that the whole thing's going to work well. So everything kind of leans on everything else.
What are some of the parts of the job you especially like?
I like the imagination part. I like the carving parts too, although sometimes it's sort of painful. I really like doing graphic design very, very much. I really don't like bookkeeping, but I just do it because that's my job. I like it when David and I are both out here working and we might have questions, or we might look at each other's work and talk about what we're doing. That partnership is a part that I like very much.
Are there parts of the job you dislike?
Sanding is not my favorite at all, because it's just, you have to do it right. You have to stick with it for a long, long time to get it right, or else it looks crappy. It's just one of those things, you just put your nose to the grindstone and do it. I've never particularly liked dealing with, well, like I said, the bookkeeping part of it, I don't really like that much. There were times where I really didn't like going to craft shows, because it's so exposed. You're standing there and thousands of people walk by and say kind of thoughtless things, but I got sort of a fix to appreciate it more, but it didn't come naturally to me.
Yeah. What are some of the ways the career of being a wood artist have changed over the course of your career?
I would say that the computers and the internet have been the biggest change. The galleries, all the galleries that I dealt with have either closed, partly because owners died, but so much business has gone online now, and that's a huge change. Just, electronic media in general have become so sort of overwhelming. I think that's what's changed the most, and then I've changed as I've gotten older and less resilient in some ways. If I spend a day chainsawing, the next day it hurts. Didn't used to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
but there's not much I can do about that.
What do you see as the future of your work and your studio in Marlboro?
Well, in the future, I think I'll probably be doing less woodworking. But what's happening, the trend that's been happening, is that collectors who bought my work over the years are slowly, they're getting older, and they're donating their work to museums. And so I have more and more work in museums. And I would assume that, 50 years from now, there'll be, a dozen or more museums around the country, and maybe a few around the world, that have my work, and that people, especially young people, will see it and will think, ooh, somebody made that out of wood. I like that thought, because I'll be gone. I mean, I'll be, long gone. But I think that's partly what compels people to make stuff, to write stories, to make movies, to make a record of their lives. And then at some time it will be like, whoa, they carved things in the olden days, it'll be history. And that's kind of a fun thought. And if things get really bad, they can pull that stuff out and make a big bonfire with it and stay warm. So it's still got the BTUs in it.
What people or experiences would you say have influenced you in your personal life? And in what ways have they influenced you?
David's been a huge influence, always keeping me on my toes. My grandchildren have been a huge influence in keeping me, sort of my trying to keep up with them has kept my brain sort of young. The experience of having children, I think, has been really huge, because it I don't know, I think it makes you a more tolerant and sort of a deeper person, having to be responsible for other people and loving other people. That's all immediate family. As I mentioned, my parents, my grandparents, my siblings, teachers that I've had over the years have all just been incredibly supportive and good to me, and that's been very important, in many ways. That sense of feeling confident to make something can either be sort of crushed or supported based on one's, environment. And so I feel like I had a really good environment, and I hope I've made the best of it.
Is there anything else about your life or work that you'd like to mention, but that I haven't asked you about?
The one thing that I think about that's a big component of my life is community involvement. For ever since I can remember, just helping out with the rummage sale or the bake sales or being on the school board. I think that living in Marlboro, living in a small community where you can take part in government, you can take part in social life, has been, again, almost like an extended family, a very supportive, and it's a way to sort of give back to people too. So that's something that that's sort of not a job, it's not something I get paid for, but it's something that I do a lot, that means a lot to me, and it gives a lot back.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for the great questions. I hope I answered. Probably when you look back at it, you're like, she didn't really answer that question.
Alright, so this is still recording.
Okay.
Yes,
So-
so starting. Shut this off at this point. A little bit more time.
It's 4:20.
Yeah, we have more time. Have you been out to talk about the lathe yet?
Nope.
No.
Oh yeah, we're just about to go.
We just finished with the questions.
I mean, David.
64, you've had to write down a whole lot of times,
Yeah.
They always want your birth date, social security number. It was just very funny to see those numbers that they got.
Alright, I have one thing. Can Michelle, can you move a little bit? Yeah, right there. And there's an Abu.
Yeah, I'll be here, but
Yeah.
I need to be out of the way just to show you all how
Yeah.
the twiddlers work.
Twiddler. Alright. I'm recording, so.
7 years
Can you
ago.
hear
Can
it?
you hear?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yo, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so this is the lathe that I was speaking about that my father built. He got the bed, this sort of horizontal part, he got somewhere at some tool auction. Some of these pieces he sort of made himself. This is a big, powerful motor that he got. He had several jobs as well, and he would do carpentry and electrical work, and he was sort of rebuilding, and somehow I think it was a church, a big pipe organ in a church that was being demolished, and he got this big motor that ran the bellows for the pipe organ. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those massive pipe organs, but it needs a lot of air pushed through it in order to make a sound. I mean, it's like a massive flute, really. Anyway, so that's the big powerful engine that makes it turn. It makes a lot of noise when you turn it on. So when you turn it on, it makes those belts go around, and then you engage the belt by moving this ratchet, and at that point, this thing will start spinning. And like I said, a potter's wheel, you'd imagine the lump of clay there, and you're making the form. In this case, it's turned on its side. So the piece spins and spins, and here's the business end right here. That's a piece of tool steel that's cut in a way that it's going to be like a little gouge, a little cutter. And as I said, normally if you're a wood turner, you've got a big, piece of metal with a handle on it, and you hold it here next to your body, and you have a little tool rest, and you move it around, and it's your physical strength that moves it. With this setup, that piece of metal is in this tool holder. The tool holder is held in a post. Everything can be swiveled around a lot of different ways, and when it comes time to cut, this makes the cutter go left to right. This makes the cutter go in and out, and just like an Etch-a-Sketch, by turning them both at the same time. You hearing that, Leander? Yeah. I can make whatever shape I want, really. So in this case, you can see it's sort of a vase form. This hasn't been turned away, that's why that's thicker. If I were making a bowl, I would start it out like this, and then I'd take this part away and have the bowl mounted here and rearrange the cutter so that it's clearing out the inside of the bowl. But it's very steady, it's very my hands are not suffering a lot of vibration. A lot of wood turners who use handheld tools get carpal tunnel syndrome, because of the just repeated bam, 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 bam of turning. It's hard on your body. So it was like lucky that my dad had this, that he thought I could use it, that I could use it, that I did use it, that I worked, for 30 years making stuff on it, and again, I sort of feel like I've been lucky that I've had a lot of lucky accidents along the way. But that's it. That's the lathe. I can turn something up to 16 inches across.
Holy.
Which is pretty darn big. You could turn something 4 feet long. You could turn bedposts practically on this thing.
Has there ever been any problems with it?
Well, when you're turning like this, sometimes, because when it's turning, I don't turn it hugely fast, but there's a certain amount of centrifugal force going on there. And occasionally, if there's like right here, you can see this is kind of a little lobe of wood. If I cut too fast or jammed it in there and it got weak, that might just pop out or fly out. I always wear a face mask. Occasionally stuff's bounced off my face mask, but because I stand here, if something falls off, it usually flies like over that direction. It doesn't, I'm not standing right in front of it, it's not hitting me between the eyes. Other than that, it's been, it's really safe and really solid. It needs oiling occasionally. like the belt needs replacing. Put duct tape on there, that's not really fix, but it's been a workhorse, it's been great.
Does the belt ever pop off?
The belt comes apart, so you can, when it comes time to put a new belt on, I'm gonna take it apart. But what the belt does is it can slide.
Yeah.
That's the slowest speed, that ratio. If you slide the belt here, you get a faster and faster ratio differential between the large and small. But I always use it on the slowest speed. I always turn very slowly. Yeah. Snuck up on me.
Leander.
That's really cool.
It is. It's
It's
incredible.
easier than doing it all by hand.
Yeah, and safer, mostly
Yeah.
really safer. And you can see if you really wanted to do super careful stuff, there's, this whole thing, there are a couple of set screws there. If I loosen those up, this whole turret can rotate. So I can cut, I can rotate this and cut a long taper, because it was meant to do metal work, to cut tapers and to cut screws and to, do the kind of things that you do with metal. But it's been a terrific tool.
Alrighty.
I guess in a way too, I got to be known for this back in the early mid-80s. A guy named Richard Starr who wrote for my Woodworking magazine came up here to interview David because David was doing woodworking with kids, and Richard wanted to do an article. And he's talking to David, and then he looks over here, and I'm working. He's like, "What the heck is this?" And he ended up doing that article, but also coming back and interviewing me. And there was this article in Woodworking magazine, years ago, and that's how a lot of people first got to know what I do in that article. So that was another little break.
Is it easy to mess up?
Uh,
Or not?
Well, yeah, it's the thing is, because I do so much carving after I'm
You
done,
used
I don't need a beautiful surface. If there's some little problems, I work around them. So I don't know if, I could show you. Can I go into the showroom?
Yeah, we could probably move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could show you what I mean by looking at a piece. Yeah, basically. And this is an example of turning a number of different ways. So here's what you have to imagine. You have to imagine that these two things were turned kind of like a thin bowl with a rim on it. They were added late in the process. This middle part here and the mermaids were turned, oriented this way in the lathe, turned from a piece of cherry. So if you imagine it had this neck, it came down, and then there were just two bulbous parts. And then I took it off the lathe, and then those two bulbous parts got carved into these two figures. And then, when I had done that, I took these two bowl shapes, carved them to look woven, attached them under these little plugs, or little brass screws, attached them, and so it gives you that mermaids in a bottle look. And so that's an example of something where I would have to make some drawings. I really have to think it through. That's not a beginner piece. It took me years to sort of even be able to conceive of it. Or it's easy to think, oh, I'm going to carve some mermaids and have them inside. And just, it's an idea and you never make it in the end of the story. But to conceive it and to go through with it and figure out the way to do it, that's where perseverance and all the other stuff I spoke about comes in. So I don't know if you can see them in there, but there they are.
If you can keep it like that, I'm going to zoom in.
It was a challenging and really fun piece to make.
with the weight woven hurts.
Yeah.
How did you like
Again,
bend it?
if you imagine that that's a solid bowl, I didn't bend it, I carved it. So it
Oh.
was solid, and I took a pencil and I laid the lines out here, and then I carved in between all of these, carved down here to look like it's going behind, but that was just solid, and I just carved it to look like that. But that's where the trompe-l'oeil, fooling the eye, comes in.
Yeah.
People look at it and think somehow I bent the wood.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that it looks unlikely.
Yeah.
I turned like little balls, little cherry balls, and cut them all apart and glued them in there. That branch was a branch. These were all made separately, these little leaves. The plate was turned. That fork, I carved out.
Oh, it's
It's stuck. Yeah, everything's stuck down. That was carved out of maple. Everything's hopefully stuck down.
yeah.
But this piece is from a long time ago, from '86, when the kids were, some of the force were younger than you when I made that. I mean, this is an example of what I mean about it doesn't have to be too careful in the turning.
Yeah, you just
You know, that's like a shape like that, and then
and
it's
just color it.
I'm gonna take that off the lathe. I'm gonna lay out all these lines and carve these leaves so that it doesn't have to come off perfect, because I'm gonna do carving like all through here. So I'm just trying to get, when I turn, I'm just trying to get the basic shape.
If someone wanted to become a woodworker, did it take years to say?
Figured out everything at all.
There's
So,
still new
I
things to
mean,
learn.
if it's something that you like doing, it doesn't matter how long it takes.
It can be frustrating too.
Like this is a piece here that was carved from basswood. Again, that was.
Can you
it's
move your butt?
One piece. What?
Can you move your butt? Other way.
Here, I'll take it. So that's just a piece of basswood, just a single
Yeah.
piece of basswood. And when I was conceiving of this, I thought, okay, I got some stuff that I had out of my, sketch